What's up everyone and welcome back to the MMA Zone. Today, let's get started with Dana White says he's not holding Nate Diaz hostage and Diaz responds. Nate Diaz has been very vocal about fighting out his UFC contract, getting the last fight of his deal done, and then moving on to seemingly greener pastures. He reiterated those intentions during a recent appearance on the MMA Hour this week with Ariel Helwani. In the interview, Diaz stated that he's been actively campaigning to get his last fight done and sorted after he fought Leon Edwards in June of 2021, a bout in which he lost by a unanimous decision. Diaz told Ariel Helwani this week that he continues to call out certain fighters, but these potential matchups keep falling through, and named Tony Ferguson, Vicente Luque, and Dustin Poirier as guys he thought would be potential matchups for his last UFC battle. Diaz also went on to say that he's been held hostage by the UFC and that he's not happy with the current situation as it stands. In response to those claims, UFC President Dana White stated this when he was asked about it during the UFC Long Island post-fight press conference this weekend.
What do you think my plans are? We're going to get him a fight.
Well, like how soon? Are you looking to get him in the next couple months or?
I don't know. We'll see what happens.
And then the other.
I have to get him 3 fights a year. I offer fights. He either accepts them or turns them down. And obviously I'm not paying him. So I've offered him fights.
Then hours after those comments were made, Diaz made a statement of his own in response. This is what he posted on Twitter about it. Dana said Francis Ngannou was injured and couldn't fight right now. I don't know why he was so confused in the interview, and in the last 9 months, I've been offered 0 fights, and I asked for 5 legitimate opponents. Thank you for the kind words. Can I go now? What do you think of White's comments here? And what do you think about Diaz's response? Brian Ortega's freak accident during fight, Yair Rodriguez issues statement. The UFC Long Island main event started with a lot of high-octane exchanges, and the makings were there for a great fight. Both fighters came out strong and ready to bang it out. But things changed when Brian Ortega and Yair Rodriguez began to grapple, as Yair was on his back while Ortega was in his guard. Ortega's shoulder dislocated during the grappling exchanges and simply fell over in agony, with Rodriguez getting up and immediately pulling back any strikes, understanding that something was wrong. The fight ended with a victory for Rodriguez, given that Ortega simply could not continue. It was a disappointing ending to an otherwise highly anticipated fight. Ortega was bemused and really taken aback by the whole situation. You could see it in his face and hear it in his voice during his interview with Megan O'Leary just after the fight.
The grip was tight on my arm and it dislocated, and that was it. Like, I was no arm lock, no nothing, but it just dislocated. Freak accident, and it just sucks. You know, it's the first time it's ever happened in my entire career, you know? Yeah, it's the first time it's ever happened.
Despite the injury, Ortega goes on to say that he feels he was winning that fight and was just getting started. Meanwhile, this is what Yair stated about the fight after the bell sounded. He went to the floor, he grabbed his shoulder, and I stopped fighting. I realized something was going on, so I let him, and I stopped fighting. I asked him, "Hey, what's going on? What happened?" And he was like, "Oh, my shoulder. So I stopped, and that's it." Yair was told by the UFC that if he won this fight, he would move on to a title fight against Alexander Volkanovski, the featherweight champion, at a later date. What are your thoughts about the way this fight ended? Booked. Charles Oliveira versus Islam Makhachev for the lightweight belt in October. Mark your calendars for October 22nd, as the UFC will be in Abu Dhabi to host a card that will be headlined by a clash for the undisputed UFC lightweight title. Number 1 contender and former champion Charles Oliveira will be taking on Islam Makhachev for the 155-pound strap. It's a fight that's been long rumored and is now finally set. Oliveira and his camp have been vocal for several weeks about how they would rather have this fight booked for January in Brazil or any other time except October in Abu Dhabi. Alas, Oliveira has signed on the dotted line for this bout, and it will in fact take place at UFC 280. The fight was announced officially during the UFC Long Island Fight Night event this past Saturday. Oliveira, who was stripped of his title prior to the Justin Gaethje fight, is on an 11-fight winning streak. He's finished all but one of his opponents during that span. Meanwhile, Makhachev is on a 10-fight win streak and has a record of 22-1. He's earned a reputation as one of the best fighters at 155 pounds and also one of the toughest in the entire UFC roster. Who's your early favorite to win this fight? Don't forget to take a second to hit that like button and subscribe to the MMA Zone to stay up to date on all of the latest fight news. Derek Brunson says he's got his money on Alex Pereira in middleweight title fight. Alex Pereira has been pretty impressive in his first 3 outings in the UFC, enough that he's getting the push to fight 185-pound king Israel Adesanya. The fight has a lot going for it, not just in terms of elite striking skill level, but the history between these two fighters makes this a must-watch. Pereira, though still much earlier in his MMA career than Adesanya, has already beaten the Nigerian Kiwi twice before in kickboxing. The last time the two met, Pereira knocked out Adesanya with a strong left hook, the first and so far only time Adesanya has ever been knocked out. But that was back in 2017 in another combat sport. Now, Adesanya is the reigning middleweight champion for the UFC. He has looked incredible during his championship run, despite some criticism from fans about his latest performance. He's running out of worthy opponents in the middleweight division, as he's dispatched several top contenders at 185. Pereira, however, presents a new challenge, an infusion of intrigue to a division that has consistently produced all-time great talents. One guy who believes the Brazilian will get the job done against Adesanya is his former opponent, Derek Brunson. Case in point, this is what Brunson said in a recent interview with Helen Yee.
If I was betting, I'm a betting guy, I'm going to bet on Alex, not because he beat him, well, yeah, because he beat him twice, but Izzy was winning the kickboxing match that he got knocked out in by Alex, is from what I heard.
Brunson believes that Adesanya will not go to the ground against Pereira, and that this will definitely be a stand-up battle, and in Brunson's mind, if the two stand and bang, the advantage is with Pereira. Still, do you agree with Brunson here? If not, tell us why you disagree in the comments.
And one more update. Anything with Jon Jones? I know it sounded like maybe Stipe, and then we haven't really heard much since then.
Working on that too. Hopefully, he should fight this year. Yeah, we'll see how it plays out. It's all going to depend on Francis and his knee.
Have you talked to him at all recently?
Yeah. We had a meeting with him last week.
Any sort of timeline for him?
Soon, I hope.
Great, thanks.
I'll let you know when I know.
Thanks, Dana.
TJ Dillashaw confirmed as Aljamain Sterling's next opponent. UFC bantamweight champion Aljamain Sterling called out TJ Dillashaw after he was declared the victor over Peter Yan in their UFC 273 clash back in April. Sterling says he wants to solidify his position as champion, now that he's beaten Peter Yan. Dillashaw, a former world champion himself, has only gotten back to pro fighting last year when he beat Corey Sandhagen by a split decision last July. Prior to that, Dillashaw hadn't fought for just over 2 years after testing positive for EPO. He was banned for competing for 2 years after he popped for performance-enhancing drugs following his loss to Henry Cejudo by a first-round TKO in January 2019. While it's been all but a certainty that Dillashaw would be Sterling's next opponent, UFC President Dana White now made it official. After the UFC Long Island event over the weekend, he was asked whether this was indeed the next title fight for the bantamweight division. And this is what White stated.
True. Yeah, that's the fight we're looking to do next. Well, I think it's a fun fight. Obviously, Dillashaw is one of the best in the world, former world champion, and yeah.
However, there are still others out there who say that Dillashaw should not be granted a title shot after popping for EPO in 2019. Dillashaw admitted his guilt in that incident and took the 2-year suspension. What do you think? Do you feel that Dillashaw, having tested positive for PED, disqualifies him for future title shots? And how do you feel about Sterling versus Dillashaw? Who's your early favorite for that fight? Thanks so much for joining us today. What do you make of what's going on in the fight world? Make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel to stay up to date on all the latest news from the MMA Zone. See you next time.